Hey there, cholerics. This is part 2 of or actually non-cholerics as well. Everybody's welcome in this podcast, but we're focusing on the cholerics today in part 2 of our 4-part series, Better Self-Coaching Questions to Ask Based on Your Temperament. We're focused on choleric today.
Yes, I love this series because I love how we can customize questions, because when we ask better questions, we get better answers. And cholerics have customized questions that work well with them. And so we're going to be talking about that.
Yeah, this is going to pair well with our Metanoia journal. And so whether you're choleric or not, you have a loved one that's choleric, this is going to be helpful to you asking better questions. Blessings.
Hey guys, welcome back
to the Catholic Coaching Podcast.
I always want to go yellow. Did anybody else have like friends, fathers who would answer the phone like that back when you would call people on wall phones? You know, yellow.
Okay.
And you're like, is Nicole there? You know.
Anyways, hey. If you responded like that, you're probably not choleric, which is what we're going to be focusing on today. So this is our series where we're focusing on better self-coaching questions for the different temperaments. We are on number 2, and that's our choleric. Usually we start off with the cholerics, but
all the cholerics would love that, wouldn't they?
Because we are the most important.
We like to switch things up around here. But yeah, so these are self-coaching questions. You can do them in your own journal. You can do them in our journal. We actually design them in the same order that we have our exercises in our journal. So if you have one of our journals or the free download, you can go along with us.
Yeah, these are going to be great journal prompts for you. A lot of the time, those are the questions that people ask. Like, how do I get more out of the journal? Or what do I do once I get here? Well, it has to do with the questions that you're asking. And depending on your temperament, you might have some questions that are more motivating to you. Certainly, we've discovered that with our clients, right? And so,
100%.
And so, leaning into the natural tendencies or motivations of our temperaments, that's how we've pondered some of these questions to ask. And they may work for you, right? So put on your discernment hat, be discerning, consider your own temperament. If you haven't figured that out yet, we have our temperaments assessment that you can take. It's free, and you can see where you lead with that. And this may be enlightening for you, not only for you, say today, if you're a choleric going through this, but if you got a loved one that's a choleric in your life. These are some questions that might be better questions to ask them to kind of motivate them or get a better response out of them. Definitely, right?
Yeah.
Cool. All right, let's get into it.
All right.
So we're following along, like Aaron said, in the 7 exercises that we have in our journal. And so exercise 1 is the daily successes. And this is very Ignatian. Like we're looking back on the last 24 hours and we're considering, what we've done to advance ourselves in growth and virtue towards a goal. But we're reflecting even on where areas that God's grace has shown up in profound ways in our life. So what are some questions that are going to be good to help that choleric really get the most out of this exercise, Aaron?
Yeah, okay. So before we go into those questions, I do want to identify what equals success to the choleric.
That's cool.
And so there's what really motivates them. Where does their motivation like to rest? Or what are the object of love, I guess you could say.
Yeah, when we talk about motivation, it's like where do you desire to rest ultimately? Where it's like once I'm here, I don't need to leave here. Like I'm fine. I'm right where I need to be. That's what we're when we talk about motivation, it's where you feel inclined to rest.
So for the choleric, success equals tangible progress. Actually, Matt, because you are first and foremost choleric. So as I'm going through these, tell us which one is the most motivating to you. Okay.
So it's a tangible progress. And what we mean by that too is like you actually have something to show, not just something conceptualized, but something to show for your efforts that is measurable, and you can say, like, look at this. Here's hard fact evidence that you can see and feel and smell and all that that shows that I'm progressing. Yep.
Production is another thing. So like producing it's probably the same thing. Tangible production, you know.
Yep.
Action, just taking action, winning, achievement, completion of tasks, decisiveness, efficiency, impact, improvement, focus, and competency.
Yeah, I like to identify where there's something there that wasn't there before, or I showed up differently in a way that, was more virtuous, right? So even, I consider oftentimes I'll have things that are with
So like
Avila.
improvement.
Yeah, some sort of improvement where it's like, okay,
That's measurable.
In this case, where I've been prone to frustration or maybe yelling in the past, I didn't do that. I was a lot more tender. I paused and like I leaned in. I prayed in that moment. I prayed for the virtue in that moment, and I showed up completely differently. And like that, so that could be something that shows up there.
Okay, cool. So you could actually add that into one of your questions. So be like, where have I improved yesterday, and how would I measure that?
Yeah.
Right?
Yep. Yeah.
So that's one of the questions.
Oftentimes relationships too, like a new contact that's there. I think even like a really good question is, I like looking back and say, God, where did you surprise me with moving me forward towards my goal in a way that was unexpected?
Ooh, I like that.
I really like that one. Where did you surprise me, Lord, in moving me towards my goal in a way that was unexpected?
That might be a good melancholic question though, too.
Well,
because I think what melancholics can do, even though we're not talking about melancholics today, but they can say there's one right way. And well, maybe that's cleric too.
Well, it's so the cleric can often, in the shadow side wants to control things. And so there's a path. And what I found, what I love about this question is it puts me in a more docile disposition where it's like, it's not all on me to kind of define what success is or move the ball forward. God is actually working with me in ways that I can't even imagine, in opening doors that I could not have even conceptualized that indicate that he's really present, he's really active. And I love the disposition that creates for me. And so
that's great.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you can kind of reframe some of these questions too with that in mind. A couple of the questions that I have is, what did I complete or achieve yesterday? How was I efficient yesterday? Or how did the Lord make me more efficient yesterday? Or how did I improve or grow in competency yesterday? I kind of like that one. And then how did I measure that? Right?
Yeah. Folks, we use questions because they send our brains on a mission.
Yeah.
And I think it's like, if you don't do this is really, a lot of the time we're coaching people. They're focused all on the gap, right? Maybe you've heard our podcast, Baptizing the Gap and the Gain, talks about building on Dan Sullivan's work, where, you've got where you're at, you've got your goal, and then you've made some progress, but you're just focusing on the road that you've not yet traveled, or the gap between where you're at and your goal. This really forces us to look back on the gain that we've had and acknowledging where God's grace is showing up. It puts you really in a natural disposition of gratitude. And even like look for fruits of praise that show up in your daily successes as well.
I love it.
Cool.
I love it. Yes.
All right.
Okay. So that brings us to gratitudes.
Yeah.
That's our second exercise.
Too.
If you're not doing this in your own journal, I highly recommend at least these two exercises, the successes and the gratitudes. And like Matt said before, you ask better questions, you get better answers. And the whole reason why we're doing this entire series on like better questions to ask a particular temperament is because, like Matt already said, but just to emphasize that more, some questions land better for certain temperaments. And so we're giving you customized questions for you to ask yourself in these temperaments. Okay. So gratitudes are really identifying some ideal conditions, right? Like you can be really grateful for ideal conditions in your life. So
what are ideal conditions, Aaron?
For the choleric, ideal conditions for the best quality of work or for the best movement.
Okay, for showing up in your strengths.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, got it.
So ideal conditions for the choleric is freedom to make one's own decision. And these are really good for you to know if you're a parent of a choleric child. So an ideal condition for a choleric child would be freedom to make their own decisions. Team members that are just as productive or at least the cleric believing that they're just as productive. And then other ideal conditions are like goals with clear success measurements, so on and so forth. What about some for you?
Well, I mean, and why are those ideal conditions, success measurements? Again, that choleric, that tangible result, right? You can hold it in your hand. You know what success looks like. If you don't have that, it's hard to get that satisfaction of achieving something because you never really have defined what achievement looks like. And so this is something that I think is really important too. I like, and this kind of goes into that, timelines. I think timelines are important to the cleric for when something is going to be delivered. Decisiveness amongst the team. So rather,
or unity.
Because again, indecisiveness translates to it's not getting accomplished. That tangible result is not going to, it's going to stay abstract and in our minds. We want to be able to hold it in our hands ultimately. And so that decisiveness, I think, is important, though. There's certainly a balance in that, but the balance is we want to have some clarity, at least to move forward, and we can get more clarity with action.
Awesome.
Yeah. Yep.
So you can be really grateful for like these ideal conditions in your life, right? So a couple of examples of that would be, Lord, I'm thankful for the freedom to make my own decisions for my business. Let's say you're a business owner and you're a choleric. I'm thankful for my team members who work hard. Lord, I'm thankful for efficiency, for the efficient team that we are becoming. Right. Anything else you want to add to that from your own life?
You know what I like? I like is resting in other people's accomplishments also. So like we're have other members of the team, accomplish something, and then I'm rejoicing in that. And then oftentimes it can go like, have I acknowledged that in them? Have I told them thank you, or that I appreciate that? Because you can kind of just be presumptive, I think, otherwise. So yeah, that's another prompt for me that works.
I love it. But
Cool.
Of course, we wanted to praise God in all things and be grateful for all things in all circumstances, a lot like St. Paul, a fellow choleric.
Yeah.
We'll say. And so obviously you're not limited to just doing ideal conditions for your temperament. You can thank God for anything.
I think both of these exercises, one of the things that we love about 1 and 2, and we've talked about this before, it really puts you into that abundance mindset, right? Versus a scarcity. You're looking, rather than looking at the gap, you're looking at the gain. And then rather than thinking to yourself, oh, the gain is all because something I did, you're seeing God's hand in it. And you're praising God and you're thanking God for it. And it just opens you up to the reality that he is a father who gives good gifts.
Amen.
Goal setting, exercise 3.
Goal setting. So this was actually kind of the whole, for me anyway, to actually create all of these questions.
The podcast series, yeah.
Yes, this podcast series. This was the section that I was finding, oh my goodness, I do not like the question, what goal do you want to achieve? I feel like it was established by a cleric. It has goal and achieve and these like motivating words in it. And for a sanguine, it just landed flat.
Yeah,
so,
and oftentimes when you're listening to a lot of the self-development, it's a big goal. It's really big.
Yeah.
And it's just like, well,
Yes.
that's intimidating.
Yeah, so even asking all of these different questions for all the different temperaments all started when I realized I really hate that question. I don't like it.
And when we started to change the language and you put it out to a lot of our coaches in the different channels, it was very interesting seeing the responses, and even asking our clients, like starting to incorporate this into how we ask the questions of our clients to be more targeted towards their temperament and what motivates them, or even giving them permission to say, yeah, that question doesn't really motivate me. Right.
Yeah.
And that being okay.
And
right?
that's the trick
Doesn't mean
here.
that they don't want to move forward.
Yeah, that's the trick here. I mean, we certainly don't want to put people into boxes. Oh, you're a cleric, so this question's going to work for you every single time. Like, we acknowledge that you're going to be different, motivated by different things, even within your temperament. But what we have found is that there is a theme for each temperament. And so as we're reading through these questions, moving forward, what we want you guys to do is just say, yeah, that one lands flat, or yes, that one motivates me. So kind of be aware of your interior disposition Is it creating excitement? Is it creating intrigue? Is it creating movement in you? These are questions that you want to ask yourself as we're asking these questions. Okay, so because I said the question about the goal, what goal do you want to achieve is a choleric question. We will start with that one. What goal do you want to achieve? The second one, and I have a couple of these highlighted actually that I kind of want to go to first because they were the fan favorites of everyone that I tested this on. But the first fan favorite for the cholerics was, what does winning look like? Matt, what's your opinion on that?
What I like about that is it's what does it look like? Okay, so if it's something that it's what it you can see it in your mind, you can hold it in your hand. It helps you to get specific as to what the goal is, and that specificity, what it does is it seems more achievable. The goal seems more. It's not something abstract, and you're confused on how to go forward to it. But when you get specific, you can start to see the path unfold on how to get there.
Well, it creates a measurable result too, which is another thing that you like.
Yeah.
And then another question is, what do you want to focus on the next season of your life? You gave me this one, actually, when I was writing this list of questions. That was a fan favorite. A lot of people like that.
No,
what about that question helps you?
Well, it's the focus, right? And again, focus is one of those signature themes in Clifton Strengths. That's, it's one of the executors themes. And it's, again, focus gives clarity. It's looking for clarity for the goal, but just one goal, right? You're checking off one box at a time. And there's a delight in just staying really steadfast, face like flint. So I think this leans into some of the natural disciplines that you see with the choleric to be very focused. And so it's like, okay, I already know that I can focus well. And it's kind of like the language also that I find myself using, right?
I also like this question too because it makes goal setting more intentional for the choleric, which in our temperaments report, which by the way is for sale now, you guys can get the entire temperaments report, which means all 4 of them, and it is a robust report. But one of the things that maybe a choleric could grow in maturity is setting the prudent goals, setting the right goals, not the right goals. I hate using that word, but like setting like better goals.
Well, it's just very intentional. So cholerics can be decisive, right? And so it's just make a decision. This is what's going to be. The other thing I like about this is this question is it talks about a season of life, which means there's always a defined beginning and end of a season. And so it's not like this is the only thing I'm ever going to focus on, but no, this is something that at the end of the season, I'm going to have attained this goal that I have. And so that inclines me to look at the season as something that's exciting. And it also informs the things that I'm going to say no to for that season of life, which is
really helpful.
Awesome.
With decision.
Yeah.
Okay, so the other fan favorite question is, what skill, strength, or gift do you want to develop and or maximize?
Okay. Yeah, I looked at this one. I was kind of, as we were prepping, and I think this one I don't necessarily find as motivating for me personally. I can see how it's focusing on strengthening something that is, you love being the person that can step into as a subject matter expert and be the gift, and be an authority, so to speak. But kind of the nuanced way that I liked it was, how do I want to stretch myself for this next season of life? And you think of stretch, it's uncomfortable. I mean, I'm not a flexible guy. I remember I used to be in this, I took a dance class in high school. Oh yeah. I took it. It was from
like ballet?
No, not ballet. It was when I was a thespian.
Was it
and
tap?
All these people.
Jazz?
Jazz hands.
Oh, wait, you have to tell me what type of dance class.
No, it was
hip hop.
It was contemporary.
Oh my goodness, that is the best.
It was Sunday evenings, and it was
So
a
you
joy.
did like interpretive dance.
No, maybe, maybe a little bit. I don't know. I
Lord.
blocked it out of my mind. But like the most painful part of that dance class was the stretching that we would have to do. And I was like, here, this like football player is another 25 pounds heavier than I was. And just, I pick up big things and I put them down, and just like all these ballerinas that are like, woo, rubber bands. And I'm just like, it's like even sitting on the ground with like my back perpendicular before I even stretched my toes was excruciating. But I also knew that there was growth that was taking place in that stretching. And so there's this, I don't think cholerics are repelled by the arduous. I think there's a desire to move into it. And in fact, there's even the challenge that is enticing about that. And so, which, the shadow side of that is sometimes making things that are simple more complicated than they need to be, just to make it more challenging.
Yeah.
So, but just that aspect of how's something going to stretch me in this next season of life, it's like, okay, yeah, it's okay if it's painful. There's growth that happens through the pain.
Yeah. So maybe the question, what challenge do I want to overcome during this next season of life?
Yeah. I mean, it's,
or like,
for some reason, like I can see for some, that might hit really well, but like for some reason, the stretching helps me a little bit more. You know what it
is? I think stretching is, it's a progression. Like, it's a progression going into it. You're like,
there's always advancement that's taking place.
Yes.
Like the challenge overcome is like, there's a moment where it's been overcome.
Yeah.
But here it's the joy of always progressing, always being able to grow, that I think with the stretching, like you can see where all of a sudden it's like, I'm, no longer 6 inches away from my toes. I'm like 4 inches away from my toes. There's progress and there's pain, there's movement that's there.
Interesting. Okay, on to the next one. We have the thought recon.
Exercise 4 in the journal.
Exercise 4, and just for anybody who's new to us here, thought recon is really just a brain dump. You have like a focus, a topic that you're just doing a brain dump on. So let's just say that you have, last one.
I know. Say dump again, Aaron. So
if you guys listened to our last podcast,
okay, we don't have to go back there.
We laughed about the word dump for about
very silly, very childish.
5 minutes.
Okay.
It was very appropriate that it was the Sanguine podcast.
Okay. All right. Great. The Choleric podcast is now Let's Keep Going.
Yeah. We're like, let's be efficient. No more laughing about the word dump.
No more dump. Okay.
So we have the thought recon, and that is where you just pick a topic and then you just get all of your thoughts out about it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So, but what happens, guys, is the reason why in our journal, and I'm just going to give you a little bit of a tip behind the curtain tip. The reason why we do the thought recon right after the goal setting question, which is what goal do you want to achieve or whatever, is because a lot of obstacles will come up.
Interior. Yeah.
Yes. So if you've kind of picked something, you're like, what area do I want to stretch in? And now you're going to have like a lot of thought obstacles. Now you're going to be like, well, I can't do it. And here's why, blah, 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 blah. And so I just have an example of a cholerics goal, and then give you guys some examples of questions to ask to really get a nice, robust thought recon.
Yeah, and this pairs with lesson 2 of the reason cycle. All right, so the reason cycle, you can find that course. That's really the algorithm, so to speak, or the way that's being practiced through the journal. It's about taking your mind and making sure it's subject to reason, good sound reason, a well-informed conscience. And it's the practice of being able to do this, and there's real growth and freedom that happens the more you employ the reason cycle. The journal is a way of doing that. But the lesson 2 of the reason cycle is identifying the problems, being aware of the problems. And so with this, we're looking at this. What are the things that your temperament is inclined to perceive as a problem? How does it, because again, something's a problem when it's not getting you to the place where you want to rest. If we have different motivations, different places that we want to rest, achievement, the problems are going to be the things that deprive us from the tangible results, so to speak, for the cleric here.
Yep.
And so you can see some of the questions are going to be a little bit more geared now, knowing where the cleric desires to rest, of uncovering those things that are potential obstacles of them achieving that desired motivation.
Yeah. And I think this is also where, to supplement this is where our temperaments report is really, really helpful.
It's really helpful.
We talk about common obstacles
Yeah.
per temperament.
And how to work through them too. Like that's
Yeah.
a distinction of our temperament report. It's not just a what, it's like a how to move forward as well. So we're really excited about it. Go get it. Go get it.
All right. So here's an example of a goal that maybe a choleric may have, and then some questions. So the cleric may say, Lord, I desire to focus on nurturing the individual strengths of my team members to create more efficiency in our production. Because I know that when someone is living in their strengths, they are happier, more productive, and everybody wins.
All right. So you had a what, and then you had a because, your
Yes.
why that was there. Okay.
So what is it that they desire? Nurturing the individual strengths of the team members.
I think it's what they desire ultimately to rest is like they want a more efficient team. That's what I heard.
Right.
Okay.
And
Yep.
productive team. And then the reason why was because they know that when people are living in their strengths, they're going to be more productive and efficient and winning.
Got it.
Everybody wins. Okay. So constructed questions for the thought recon would be, what is in the way of achieving this goal? So the thought recon is really it's helping you identify what are the obstacles. But notice even the word, what is in the way of you achieving this goal? That is a choleric word, that achievement piece. Or what is in the way of you producing this result? You tell me which one is your favorite too out of reading these.
Sure.
Why
I've got some to add.
haven't we arrived at this result yet? Might be another good question. What am I currently doing or focusing on that is taking focus away from this goal or this result that I want to create? And what is causing inefficiency in arriving at this goal?
Yeah. So what I like about these questions is there's a lot of external focus. There's that third one, there's a little bit of internal focus, but the shadow side of the cleric is I'm right. And so everybody else is wrong. And so everybody else is the problem. So there's a tendency to really blame shift when it comes to that. And so it's kind of bringing all the thoughts that you have about the people and the circumstances around you that are outside of your locus of control, perhaps, that you're using as an excuse for not moving forward, right? As long as we still believe those things are an excuse or a valid excuse, which they're not, it's gonna pause us. There's gonna be some hesitancy that's there. But I also like to have these questions leaning into where that shadow side of the temperament shows up. So one of the shadow sides of the choleric is I want to control things. I want to be in control of it. The whole process, I want to be in control of it. Well, we know you can do that to a fault of strangling your own baby and your goal here being your baby. So one of the questions I like to ask in the recon is, where am I feeling out of control in this process? Or where do I find myself grasping at control in this process? Again, that's kind of, even the shadow side of, Lord, I must increase, you must decrease. That's kind of the shadow side. What I think this does is it starts to identify where we may be lacking trust in the Lord, trust in the team, trust even in our own abilities. And let's just bring that to the surface to evaluate if that mistrust is even valid, or how we might be able to grow in trust in that area, or where the Lord might be asking us to detach a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I love that question for every one of
Every one of them?
Yeah, I think that's such a good question.
Cool.
Like, where am I attached to this goal working out? And
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure you could
specifically
change.
it's attached to control.
Yeah.
That's what makes this one choleric, because I think
it.
you could be like, for a phlegmatic, where am I attached to a relationship or a certain, way that a relationship is. Another question is like, who or what do I often blame for not making my goal?
Oh yeah,
That's something.
And why?
Yep. What other duties do I fear will suffer if I pursue this goal? Okay, so there's that sense of responsibility there that the cleric will also often have. Beyond just, so it's like, if I am doing what excellence demands over here, what am I compromising over here? All right, so it's like, I want to pursue this goal, but it potentially will compromise my showing up and being a good father or a good husband. I know that's something where as soon as if I'm holding on to that, I can't move forward. because that is now it's detrimental to me being responsible and me being obedient, really, to the duties or fulfilling the duties elsewhere.
What about the question, where might I be wasting time?
Where might I be wasting time? I think that could
energy.
Work. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, and just kind of being very like factual about it, because that's one thing that's certainly an internal and external trigger of the choleric is wasting time. And even
I like the positive side for it a little bit more, or like maybe in like what or actually, that works. What do I think is sucking the time out, like occupying my time?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So those are good.
Cool. On to the
into
next
it.
one. So this is really this next, it's exercise 5 in our journal. So if you're following along in our journal, that's what exercise 5 is. If you're just doing this in your own journal, you can just write at the top of this section, capture and release. This is where we look at your thought recon and we pick one thought.
Mm-hmm.
Any thought. It could be a common one. It could be a belief, which is really just a thought you keep on thinking and that you really believe is true. It could be a thought that you're like, no, this is 100% true. This is totally facts. And you're like, actually, it's not. So you just want to grab one of those thoughts and bring it to the top. I have an example thought here for choleric.
And a cleric may want to bring all the thoughts forward because they think like but I'll tell you that is not efficient. And that will not result in faster growth. That will result in slower growth at this point. So trust me on that.
It will waste your time.
One thought at a time. That's what renewal looks like. One thought at a time.
So this example one that we have is we haven't achieved this goal because my team members are dragging their feet. Mm-hmm. Matt, does this sound like a common choleric thought?
I don't necessarily have it though. I mean, like, right.
Have
okay,
you?
Sure. It's yes. Okay.
Have you ever had this?
Well,
thought?
again, it's the blame. There's a self-righteousness that I would say is the emotion that comes forth from this, or maybe there's just like some people it might build a hesitancy, because there's a lack of trust in the team, or just frustration, right?
Yeah.
Of like kind of an anger of this.
And I can hear all of my cholerics saying this. It's like, yeah, but that's true. And it's like, yes, but it's a thought. Because and here's why I can say it's a thought. Because not everybody has this thought, right? So it's not a fact necessarily. It is a perception of maybe something that you could find a lot of evidence to support, but it's still a perception. And it's still a perception that I want to ask you, do you want to continue thinking it? Mm-hmm. And we can answer this question by bringing you to the next step of this
reason
particular
cycle.
step.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So a lot of these things, what we're doing here, even in our reason cycle course that we have in our academy, this is where we're still kind of looking at the what's. We're still in the understanding phase. Our reason cycle has understanding, judgment, and then reason. You finally make a decision phase to it. And so here we're just looking at what's the thought, what's the emotion, what is the trajectory of it. We're starting to get in a little bit of a judgment here as well. Mm-hmm. Judgment phase, but continue.
Yes. So some constructed questions that I think are really helpful for the choleric to really kind of look at the thought from a different angle, from a different perception are first I would always suggest for the choleric to look at the trajectory of the thought. And what I mean by that is to answer the question, how do I feel when I think this thought? And then what do I do and what do I avoid doing? And specifically have the choleric, or if you're a choleric, have yourself look at the actions and the lack of actions.
Or the inclinations here. It's like,
what do you feel momentum to do?
Yeah,
right?
You may feel inclined to punch someone, but not do it.
Yes.
But you still feel inclined to punch someone, and there's a problem there.
Yes. So for this one, we'll take the example, I haven't achieved this goal because my team members are dragging their feet. Okay, so if I were to be coaching this person, I would say, okay, so what is that thought? Like, what is the one word emotion that comes up when you think that thought? Mm-hmm. And they may say frustration.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. And then you would say, okay, so from frustration, what would you do or avoid doing? Like, what would show up? What would you be doing in that action line? And They may say, well, I'll rush the team members to do what I'm asking them to do.
Yeah, I do. I take it on myself. I do it all myself.
Take it on myself. I judge and I blame them. I grow in impatience.
Yeah, I harbor resentment.
What do you not do, Matt, from this place of frustration?
I never actually fix the problem. I never actually voice it and see what's going on, or I just, it's all quiet and it's all passive aggressive at that point. Mm-hmm. Yeah, but then there's also one of the things that I have found myself doing in the past is I get very presumptive about other people's intentions and their own interior life. And maybe this is my melancholic that comes in, but I start really getting presumptive of their intentions. This is what they're trying to do. And, justifying me even being further defensive.
Well, yeah, justifying the narrative that's already in your head.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
So that's one thing you want to do, guys. If you are choleric, look at what actions that thought leads to for you. And then you can really look at this as a measurable standpoint, which is what you like so much, right?
Yeah.
Finding some measurement. The next thing I want you to do is look at the usefulness of the thought regarding the goal. So remember that from this example, the goal is to create unity, to create, to actually create more efficiency.
Right. So we're going back to the goal that we
Yes.
had. Want the team to be more productive, want the team to be more cohesive, living in their gifts.
Yes.
Got it.
And so you can ask the question, does this thought actually lead me to and bring me closer to the goal or not?
I love that because it's very objective, because you can start to look at, and this is where there's a virtue called foresight, and really what that virtue proposes is that you don't have to actually experience the negative outcome to know that where you're going is bad, right? We have the gift of being able to look kind of at the trajectory of where things are going, and through reason, be able to say, okay, I don't like where this is headed, right?
Yeah.
Kind of like if I'm sitting in a river that is slowly picking up speed and now it's a torrent, it's kind of like reason tells me I'm heading for a waterfall and I should probably get out of the river at this point. And so I love this question. I love the question also. It's actually part of our reason cycle worksheet, which is, what do you think this thought, this emotion is going to accomplish? What do you really think it's going to accomplish?
That's so good.
Because then you can say, well, that's getting into intention, the goal, of choosing that thought. And then it's like, is that really happening? Are you doing the things or creating the space to allow that result to flourish?
Right. Are you creating more of an efficient team this
Or
way?
or are you causing more problems?
Right.
Yeah. And this, I think we can look at this like rushing the team, I'll do it myself. Building resentment is not leading to that outcome. And so it's like, okay, well, you can't change that this thought and this emotion leads this way. You can't change that. So what are you going to think instead? Now we start to, we've moved from understanding into judgment, but we've collected a lot of that evidence too. But I think that's I love that question. What do you think what's the perceived payoff that you think this is going to give you? It gets into intention.
Yeah. I also like the question, what's the upside of thinking this thought?
Yeah, right.
Too, which is kind of like the other end of that. What's the payoff, but also no, actually it's the same question, right?
Yeah.
What's the upside of thinking this thought? And then what you want to do as a choleric, and obviously guys, if you're listening to this and you're sanguine or phlegmatic or whatever, and you're like, I love these questions, like use them for yourself, is consider a new thought. So one thing that I love about the choleric temperament is that they have wills of steel. Like they just have a will. And even if I'm coaching a cleric, I will remind them, hey, did you know that you can actually think something new? Now that we know that this other thought leads to this, and it's really not getting you closer to your goal, it's really not creating the result that you want, it's actually doing the opposite. What do you want to think now? What is something else that you could choose to start thinking? Maybe you don't have to believe it 100%, but like that could be your new goal. Is like, I know that if I start believing this goal, this new thought, I'm going to work faster and more efficiently towards this other goal.
Right. So this starts to move us into the exercise 7. And if you're listening, you're probably like, wait, what happened to 6? Right. And 6 is like that release exercise. And it's going to be pretty much the same for all of the temperaments. So you're identifying, you're looking back and you're like, okay, where's the shadow side of my temperament showing up? What are the things that I'm going to repent of? What are the things I'm going to renounce in the name of Jesus? Where do I, perhaps need to let go of anger and forgive myself or some other members of the team, whether they did anything wrong or not, or even forgive God. Whether they didn't, we know God never does anything wrong, but it doesn't stop us from harboring anger or resentment towards them. So forgiveness is really that action of release that really opens you up. I'd say that there's a spiritual power that's in that and a grace that can be it makes available through the act of repentance.
It breaks strongholds. It breaks fortresses on the inside that are actually blocking you from growth. And so it's so needed.
It is the efficient way, fellow cholerics.
It's the quickest way.
Quickest and efficient way. All right, metanoia, exercise 7.
No, you jumped ahead. I was saying consider new thoughts. I was going to read other questions.
Oh, okay. Forgive me.
Yes. So considering new thoughts would be like, if I could choose a better thought that's equally as true, what would I choose? And I like that because it's like, no, this other one still feels really true. But it's like, what could be as equally as true, but taking the drama out of it, So that's all. That was just some of my ideas.
Well, it's a good segue. You can see how I could think that thought or that question would belong in an exercise 7, which is all about really the new thing.
Yes.
That you're choosing.
Metanoia.
So good inclination.
Yes.
So again, one of the things that distinguishes us at Metanoia Catholic from other personal development is we are not the authors of the new thought, right? We're co-creators of the new thought.
We're also not authors of objective truth.
right. And so it's kind of like, all right, we're really going to invite the person that came up with the stinky thoughts in the beginning to come up with the better thoughts. It doesn't mean that we deny our God-given reason. We have a rational capacity, and when we're operating from that, we can come up with some better thoughts. But even that is a gift of God's grace. And sometimes, and it's not just, the goal here is not just a metanoia to become a better natural human being. All right, that's great. But our trajectory, our ultimate goal is beatitude, right? That's a supernatural trajectory. That is a divinization that needs to take place. And it happens by, acknowledging God's word in a very particular way, personal way, working in us. And these have been very profound moments that I know I've had with the journaling.
Yeah. It's the best part.
The better part.
So this comes right after Matt was saying before the release step, which is where we repent, we forgive, and we renounce. And then now it's like we're a little more open to actually receive what the Lord is saying to us. But I do like these questions for a choleric. Once again, we have those signature motivations behind a lot of these questions. But it could be, so the question that we have in our journal is, Lord, what is your interpretation? Which is a fantastic question. But some other nuances of this that are a little bit more choleric could look like this. Lord, what should my main focus be here? What should I be focusing on? What should I be refocusing on, right? Maybe I lost focus and maybe I need to focus on something else here. Lord, what is the most productive way forward? And then just stop and listen. And another question is, Lord, what does winning look like to you? Anything else you want to add?
Well, I mean, sometimes it's like, even I ask those questions and there's a prompting to lean into our own reason. So when there's silence here, and even St. Ignatius talks about this, right? You make a decision and there's 4 different ways I'm not going to get into right now, but for confirmation, but one of those is like, you offer up the decision for how you're going to move forward to the Lord, and then you neither feel like a consolation or a desolation. You just kind of settled. And sometimes the Lord is that's his way of saying, no, like reason, your reason alone. I trust you to be able to make this decision based on your God-given reason, right? And so sometimes it doesn't mean that we just sit there and we're always quiet. I think there's a period of silence that's prudent in this, and the choleric will feel inclined to fill it. But what I do in that space is I will often craft, this is the way forward that I see, the best way forward that I see, but it's, Lord, you tweak it. I submit, this is what I'm coming up with. What do you see? And what that does is it at least gives a way forward, a resolution you can walk away with, rather than you're sitting there and you're quiet and nothing happens, it's like, okay, if nothing's happened, at least fall back on your God-given reason and make some sort of resolution for how you're going to choose to think, even that what's the better thought question that you asked before and how you can move forward.
Yeah. Yes. So that is it.
That's it. So those are some of the better journal prompts, the better self-coaching questions. When we talk about self-coaching, we're talking about really journaling, right?
Specifically with our journal.
It slows down. It slows you down. You can, like, there's a reason everybody, not everybody, but there are people who are like, when are you going to come out with the digital version? It's like, actually, there's something just very human, even on a neurological level, that slows down. You write these things out, pen to paper, versus just a digital journal, right? That, is probably on a device that you're getting all these other distractions on while you're doing it. So taking that pen to paper really slows things down, gets you focused. And, one thought at a time here, folks. That's what progress looks like. That's what being transformed by the renewing of your mind is really what's going to transform the church, the culture of the church. That's going to happen one thought at a time. And what I love about our journal is it's a daily opportunity for metanoia, for transformation. And this isn't just transformation by thinking a new thought. That's part of it on a practical level. But it's receiving a thought from the Lord that has grace and power behind it. And sometimes it's literally a word from God. Like I found even my exercise 7, I was telling you the other day, Aaron, that sometimes the Lord will give me the beginning of a verse that I know, but I don't have it committed to memory. And then I go and I search out, and it's the follow-on verse that really speaks to exactly what I'm journaling on.
Yeah, it's like a preview.
Yeah.
Matt loves watching previews of movies. It's like his favorite pastime. It's really funny. But yeah, so it's like preview of upcoming events, or preview of... What am I trying to think of?
Coming attractions?
Yeah, there you go.
Okay, there you go. Speaking of that, what's our next podcast we're going to be on? What do we focus on?
We are going to be talking about the phlegmatic. We're all out of order today.
We're not saving you for the last, phlegmatics, like we usually do.
Yeah. So we're going to be talking about that. So stick around, guys.
All right. We'll see you later. Check out the Academy.
Bye.
We dive deep into this work in the Academy. And get that temperaments assessment. Bye. Hey, thanks for sticking with us in the Catholic Coaching Podcast. If you like what you heard,
please like and subscribe, and we'll see you again.